Welcome to BTI Hockey's first segment of the Roundtable. I'm Tony Brar, this is Brenden Escott, and we got you covered all things NHL trade deadline. Brendan, what's on tap for today's show?
We're going to give you the rundown on the Oilers. First and foremost, we've got some Kevin Shattenkirk talk. We'll speak about the impact of that deal. Steve Yzerman, and what looked weird on the surface actually was a little bit of a genius move. Curtis Lazar, hometown Edmonton favorite. Alex Burrows, and then we'll talk about why the trade deadline really isn't that exciting anymore.
Well, let's get straight into it. Since we're based out of Edmonton, let's talk about the Edmonton Oilers. They shipped out Brendan Davidson to the Montreal Canadiens for, drumroll please, David Desharnais. I'll tell you what, a lot of people aren't a fan of this move. I'll tell you why I like it. David Desharnais comes in and he revamps the Oilers' bottom six forwards. Revamp may be too big of a word to describe that, but you know what? He increases competition. You look at guys like Drake Caggiula, who's battling in that third-line center role. You know, you have to compete in order to get in the lineup. This may give a guy like Drake Caggiula more time in the press box in order to, you know, understand the game a bit more. You know, he's accustomed to the NCAA schedule. So I see this as a big benefit for the young forward.
Well, and not only that, but you had to know that Brandon Davison was likely going to be lost in this expansion draft. So really, it's better to get something out of this than nothing for the Oilers. From that standpoint, I understand the deal. As far as the impact that Desharnais is really going to have on this team, I think it's going to be minimal. And I think that Chiarelli even acknowledged that, saying they're getting a bottom six guy. Yep. He's not really that big. He doesn't necessarily fit that role to a T. But I think in the long run, this is the right move for the Oilers.
And also, another big thing about David Desharnais is he has playoff experience. A lot of Oilers, you know, they're going to the playoffs this year, and this can be the first time in it. You know, they added another guy who's been there before and is able to, you know, guide the youngsters, even if it is just for this season.
Absolutely. How about Kevin Shattenkirk in that move?
The biggest trade deadline, well, I guess pre-trade deadline move of this year. Kevin Shattenkirk, the offensive defenseman, the now former St. Louis Blue turns into a Washington Capital, and I really like this move for the Caps. It puts them a little bit over the top. I think they were the best team in the National Hockey League. They got the best, I guess, prize out there in the trade deadline. What do you think of it?
I completely agree with that, and I think they already had John Carlson there as sort of a power play quarterback, but in reality, Tony, I don't know if he's really the quality of player that Kevin Shattenkirk is, and everybody knew he was going to move. I just don't think there was any rumblings necessarily he was going to end up a Capital, but really from the Cap standpoint, I think it's a fantastic move, and maybe one that finally gets them over the hump, because they've been trying for a long, long time, and it really hasn't panned out for them.
And you know what? They got a lot of pending unrestricted free agents coming up as well. They got TJ Oshie, they got Carl Osner, and even Kevin Shattenkirk. He's going to be a UFA. This might be their last chance in order to take a shot at the Stanley Cup. So very, very happy with that move for Washington.
Now the Lightning, they were busy. Steve Yzerman, a couple of moves involving Mark Streit that on the surface we were kind of scratching our heads looking at what was he doing, and you dug a little bit deeper and found out that he actually might have had a little bit of evil genius behind that.
You know what? He is a genius. He is a patient man, and he made things work. So he shipped Valtteri Filppula, a fourth-round pick in this year's draft, and a conditional seventh that's what he shipped out, and in order to receive Mark Streit. Then he flipped Mark Streit to the Pittsburgh Penguins and got a fourth-round pick, but he saved over $3 million in cap space. And you know what? As a team, they're right up there. You know, they got important RFAs coming up, important UFAs coming up. This gives them a bit more wiggle room in order to get those guys signed and kind of give them the raise that they deserve. So I really like that trade. Great on Steve Yzerman.
Curtis Lazar, slumping Curtis Lazar for really a couple of years. Not sure whether he was going to reach his full potential in Ottawa. Doesn't matter anymore. He's off to Calgary. He's back in the western part of Canada, played junior hockey here for the Oil Kings. And I think this is a really good move for both parties to have just gotten a fresh start. I think they were both happy about that.
Absolutely, especially in Curtis Lazar's, I guess, press conference right after the trade. He kind of identified that this will be a new fresh start for him. You know, he has one assist in, I believe it's 25, 26 games this year. 33 games this year. But, you know, we saw what he can do in last year's World Junior Championships. I think this is a great move by Calgary.
I think so, too. He's a young, impactful player, or at least has the potential to be, and it was stale in Ottawa for him. So I think he'll be happy out here at home. As a former BC kid, I really would have liked to have seen the Canucks make a move for him, but no such luck. I think Calgary got a real quality player to develop in their bottom six and eventually move up into the top six.
And that's no slouch to Jyrki Jokipaka. He's a very serviceable defenseman, but Calgary's loaded with defensemen, and they turned it into, you know, getting a potential top 6 winger in the future. So I really like that move by Trevelyan. Great work.
Speaking of the Canucks, Alex Burrows, maybe a little bit overdue. He's out of town. He's in Ottawa now.
He's in Ottawa as well, but they had to give up Jonathan Dahlen. And I was kind of surprised that they gave him up, especially considering the World Junior he had with Sweden. This is like a mini Philip Forsberg, Martin Erat trade. Maybe not as significant, but it has the exact same, characteristics to it. Ottawa's getting a player, a much older player. They're trying to get into that first place in the Atlantic, so they really think this will take them over the hump. But it came at a cost, and great on Jim Benning on getting Dahlen. I'm a big fan of his. Can't wait to see what he does in Vancouver.
Yeah, Benning made a couple of great moves here, and as I mentioned, I think Canucks were probably a couple years overdue, but they managed to get some really good value out of Alex Burrows. He goes to a team who's in contention. It made sense for both parties, and the Canucks love their young Swedish players, so Dahlen was a really, really good fit there.
Absolutely, and you know what? This may be the first move of many in order to get that team into a rebuild. We are now starting to finally see that they recognize that, their window has closed quite a long time ago, and they're starting to begin that rebuild, and I hope Dahlen is a big part of that.
Now let's talk for a minute, Tony, to wrap this up about the whole hype behind Trade Center, and is it really worth it anymore? I mean, here's the thing for me. From TSN's standpoint, they lost the contract with the NHL. They need some sort of NHL coverage. This is Canada. So this is a really good opportunity for them to try and boost their ratings, but every year it seems to be a flop. And I was talking to my dad on the phone last night. We were trying to hash out when the last really big, surprising trade deadline deal was. Rick Nash out of Columbus to the Rangers. And really, that didn't even work out that well for them.
Yeah.
When was the last time that you can name a team that made a move at the deadline and it really put them over the top? It really pushed them through the playoffs and got them the cup they were looking for. I can't think of one, Tony.
Yeah, you know what? Today's NHL, it makes it so hard to make in-season moves, especially this year. This year out of all years, the salary cap did not go as high as they expected it to. A lot less wiggle room, a lot less room to make moves, impactful moves within season. We're starting to see that the summer is a much more popular time in order to get this done. So, you know what? I'm in favor of having trade deadline day shows. Just don't make them 10 hours.
Definitely not. I mean, it's got to be tough from TSN or Sportsnet standpoint to try and pump coverage when most of the deals came in after the deadline had passed. So what are you really doing? What are you sitting there watching? You and I both would stay home from school, Tony, to watch trade deadline, and it just got to a point where it wasn't worth it anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? That's not really their fault. I understand that they're trying to get ratings and everything, but it's just so much harder in this new era of the NHL with the salary cap and everything. Much tougher to make impactful trades within season.
So that does it for the first edition of the Roundtable on BTI Hockey. Expect many more of these. We'll do a weekly segment giving you a video, some visual content, talking about all things hockey.
Awesome. Thanks for tuning in, and visit btihockey.com for the latest in-depth news for the NHL.